Halloween may have come and gone, ladies and gentlemen, but much like the Smash Mouth song, and they don't stop coming, 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 the horror stories coming out of the Socialist Republic Utopia, Multicultural Utopia of Britain definitely do not stop coming, it seems. I'm your friendly neighbourhood far-right thug, George Cresswell, and this is Voice of the Valleys. Hope we're all doing well, guys. Hope we're all having a fantastic morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. First things first, ladies and gentlemen, a big thank you to all of you who like, share, subscribe, all of that stuff. Really, really appreciate it. Comments, etc. Make sure you have notifications turned on so you always get notified when a new video goes up. New video just went up today, actually, which was an extract of my breakdown of The Last Girl, which you can still get in the members areas and stuff like that. Got the next installment in that coming up for you very, very soon as I can find where my tripods for my cameras are. I've misplaced them. I do not know where the hell they are. And obviously I can't record until that happens. So apologies, I'm a little bit late on that, but we'll get into that in a little moment. Another thing that's coming up very soon, ladies and gentlemen, is my conversation with Joe Marsh. I feel that you're really going to enjoy that conversation, really going to like it. A lot of good things that we talked about, particularly with regards to, you know, the Welsh political scene, the British political scene, and all things like that. So I can't wait to bring that to you. And yeah, it's really indicative at the moment. We have really big problems, ladies and gentlemen. As you may have seen recently, one of the big stories we'll be talking about today is what happened in Cambridgeshire recently, the train incident, the mass stabbing incident. There's been a lot of things been said about it, some things seemingly not true, some things seemingly true about it. Many people tried to obfuscate, change narratives on it, etc. One of the biggest things is, though, ladies and gentlemen, one of the biggest things we're really going to have to start reckoning with in Britain nowadays, ladies and gentlemen, is that the problem is no longer just merely an imported problem. The problems that we have with many communities, right, with many people, sadly, who do have some kind of vengeful mentality towards us, whether it's because of race, whether it's because of perceived historical injustices, all of these other things, that they're not just imported problems anymore, they're now homegrown, or we might use the term British-born, should we say. In fact, why you should go and listen to that or watch that video on The Last Girl, ladies and gentlemen, is because it's very similar, in my opinion, to something which happened to the Yazidi community, right, with what happened when they were taken over. So I'm going to read you this before we start, ladies and gentlemen, and just have this in your mind as we go. Where is it? Where's the quote? It's somewhere around here. There's a particular quote I want to read to you, ladies and gentlemen, that is particularly pertinent to the UK. If you haven't gone and read this book, I would strongly recommend it. Right? I would strongly recommend it. And I've just lost the quote again now. God damn it. No. This is no good. There we are. Okay, got it again. This one is particularly pertinent because it would be slightly different in these areas of the world, right? When we're talking about ISIS, when we're talking about terror groups, which in many instances, because of our open borders policy, we likely do have to be concerned about that. Now, it's not only encouraged human trafficking, child trafficking, all of these other things, right? Drug smuggling with the open borders, right? It's also now contributed potentially even to terrorists coming in through the open border. Al-Qaeda, you know, Hamas even, but Hamas we seem to be importing willingly and gleefully, as we'll get into a little bit later on in the show. A lot of people seeing the suicidal open borders and also the suicidal politicians cheering on, be like, yeah, look how empathetic and virtuous we are, guys. Look how much we hate our own people and want to bring everybody else here from around the world. Foreign governments want to do us harm, mind you. They see that, they go, fuck yes. Let's send all our worst people there. Let's send our agents there. Let's send our agents of terror there. But also, let's send the worst people of our society there, because quite clearly they want to deal with them. They want to deal with them. So we'll send the worst of our societies there as well. So in many instances, you can make the argument we're not getting the best and brightest as we've been frequently told that we are. Which obviously you look at your public services, you look at all manner of other things, you look at the way people say things have changed, right? Businesses not performing seemingly how they would, how they used to in many ways, right? As many would say, people complain all the times about service and all of these things. Maybe we're not getting the best and brightest from other areas of the world. Maybe we never needed them in the first place. Maybe especially given that we were really the kickstarter, you know, the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. Maybe we never needed them. Have to think about that, ladies and gentlemen. But also have to think about this. I'm gonna read you this kind of quote. It's in two parts. I'm gonna break it into two parts because one part really highlights how our politicians will try to paper over these things. They'll try to go on about community cohesion, not to inflame community tensions. Oh, we've always worked together. All of this stuff, trying to paper over the problems that do exist. And then it really hits home when we get to the second part of the quote. So the first part of the quote, ladies and gentlemen, referencing Sinjar, which is the place where the story takes place, right? It's the region of the world where Nadia's hometown of Kocho was. In Sinjar, Yazidis and Arabs all live together. We rely on one another for trade and pass through one another's towns. So, first part, all living together, all seems to be kumbaya, all getting along, right? In many instances, these people are quite ethnically similar, right? There might be certain differences, might be certain religious differences. Obviously, Arabs, for the most part, tend to be Muslim. You do have Arab Christians, obviously, and other sects and so on. But you then also have Yazidis, which are a distinct religion and people in and of themselves. They seem to get along the way that the politicians like to champion diversity and multiculturalism, being like, don't look at all the horrific industrial child going on for racial and religious reasons. Look at the people down the look at this lovely one family, right? And that's in many instances as people's one experience of multiculturalism. They don't look at Tower Hamlets, for example, and see that their representatives are now campaigning for the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party out in Bangladesh, mind you. Our MPs are campaigning. You say that our MPs have foreign interests because they're foreigners, and you get labelled as xenophobic, Islamophobic, racist, all of these things. But then they're actively campaigning for the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party. Second part of the quote, ladies and gentlemen, this is where things start to get really serious. We tried to be friends, but our enemy built itself up inside Sinjar like a disease aimed at killing anything it came into contact with. We tried to be friends, but our enemy built itself up inside. And the only thing is now, the biggest thing that's different between Britain is that we never asked for this. We never asked for masses of these people to come here. In many ways, whenever they were asked, the people were asked, they resoundingly voted against it. They resoundingly voiced opposition to it. To the extent you've had multiple riots over this stuff. The Windrush boat very nearly turned away, right? They've been backstabbed at every single turn. And that's why a lot of the things you see nowadays, a lot of the sentiment nowadays is not new. Is not new. And it's only getting worse because we've seen a lot of these communities now. We've seen what they truly are. We've seen how our enemy has built itself up inside. And as we said, many of these people, the reality is they've come here with grievances and they've come here with a want to take things away from us. That is just the reality. Rather unfortunately. It's just the reality, and we cannot pretend otherwise. Now, keep that in mind as we go through some of the things today, ladies and gentlemen. The first story, which broke a little while ago, was possibly, the reason this is so important, possibly the only Afghan that is residing in this one area of Scotland was later then revealed to be a rapist and is currently facing arrest. He's been arrested, I believe, and he's currently facing charges for a horrific, brutal in a small Scottish province of Elgin. Well, the province is Moray, but the small town of Elgin, which, when you do the math, ladies and gentlemen, as I'll bring up the census data in a moment, it's about 25,000 people, somewhere around there. And in fact, I'll bring this up on the map for you, just so you can see here. So this is an example, right, of really why we should be caring about seemingly anybody from certain areas of the world, right? And it really casts a dagger in the heart of the whole cultures are created equal and all people are the same and think the same narratives, right? Which is the big, multicultural cosmopolitan talking point, if you will, or cosmopolitanism talking point. Check this out. So this is Scotland, right? This is the province of Moray. You see here, this is the province of Moray. And already you can see here that the population of people, say you call them Asian British or Asian Scottish. So we're looking at Pakistani and Pakistani Scottish or Pakistani British, right? All of these really nebulous, meaningless categories, right? Because again, it's implying that anybody can be a Scot, so to speak, which obviously is not true. But then we zoom in, and you see the small town of Elgin. So Elgin South has about, let's have a look here, has about 0.3%, and Elgin North also has about 0.3%. Depending on the individual area, you might get slightly different percentages, but 0.3%. We're not even looking here, mind you, at Afghanis in particular, because the Scottish census doesn't actually break it down in that way. Now, why is this important? Well, when you do the math, ladies and gentlemen, you find that it would be somewhere the overall population of this area that comes from sort of this descent is about 60 to 70 people. And again, we're looking at Pakistanis here, not Afghanis. So there's a good potential that the only Afghan that is residing in this area of Elgin turned out to be a rapist. How about that? How about that? Maybe there were some factors involved in that. Maybe we can think of where these people are coming from in the world, their social customs, right? The way that they see the world, religious and racial themes, right? Which sadly are just completely unavoidable at this point. When you look at the gang excerpts, for example, it's unavoidable that even if you, rightfully so, don't inherently demonize people because of their race, right? There are many people in the world that do operate on a system of racial supremacy. They do. And that's manifest in the words that they use. It's manifest in the words that they use and the horrific atrocities that they inflicted on our young girls. And that's just an unfortunate reality. That's just an unfortunate reality. That you have a target on your back. If you're a native British person, you have a target on your back in the eyes of many because of your race and because of where you live. And then you factor in historic, quote-unquote, historic injustices and all of this stuff. But here's a bit more of this story, ladies and gentlemen, from the Scottish Express, so you can see exactly that this is not an isolated incident in that it follows a very similar pattern to what we see happening in many areas of England and what it seems to be going on in many areas of Wales as well, in Cardiff, in Swansea, in the big cities, right, but potentially in smaller, very ethnically homogenous townships and boroughs and valleys and stuff like that as well. Afghan asylum seeker jailed for brutal rape of vulnerable teenage girl in Scottstown. Teenage girl. Rapuala Amadzi, which literally, ladies and gentlemen, people have been making the comment online that literally this guy's name is basically you all, I'm Madsi, right? Attacked the girl in a darkened park after she told the court she sometimes went for a walk at night and listened to her music to ease her mental health issues. Would be great. Great. You're thinking you're safe in your communities. You can go for a walk late at night, maybe listen to a bit of music or a podcast or an audiobook. Maybe you're listening to this right now. But now it seems you have to keep an eye over your shoulder for predatory Afghans. Thanks, UK government. Thanks. And granted, obviously, you should be keeping your head up anyway. You should be keeping your head on a swivel anyway, because you could accost somebody that has bad intentions anyway, and they could be native British, right? Nobody's saying that. Nobody's saying that you couldn't, right? But now we have a massively imported problem. It's a weird argument, right, that many of the lefties make. We have so many, seemingly we're so evil as the British, right? We're so evil. We do all these horrible things. We have so many criminals of our own. And then that's used as a way to obfuscate away from the nature of foreign criminals, right? And then that's used often as an impetus to push for more migration and that immigration isn't a problem. It's a really weird argument that because we have criminals of our own, that means we need to import the world's criminals. Again, it's people operating on some kind of vindictive, vengeful bent because they think that we need to be a dumping ground for the world. That we have our own criminals anyway that pose enough danger to us in our own society, right? But then we need to have our societies be endangered more and more and more for whatever reason, because of unearned white privilege or whatever, that we need to be a dumping ground for the rest of the world's criminals as well. Fantastic. Fantastic. And the government's like, yes, because he's a voter. He's a voter, and if I'm so nice to him, he'll hopefully vote for me. because I'm so weak and I don't stand by my people. An Afghani asylum seeker who was a vulnerable teenager in a brutal attack at a town park after claiming he would be her quote-unquote boyfriend is facing a jail sentence tonight. I'm not going to go into too many details of this, ladies and gentlemen. You can read the article down below. I don't actually like recounting a lot of this stuff, but the grooming process, which you'll see now, which is very quick, right? This took place probably over the matter of several minutes to an hour, maybe. I don't know. But it starts off with a lie, right? Starts off with obviously him accosting his victim, but with a lie. Then obviously once he's been able to get close enough to make physical contact, right, not letting her escape, and that's it. You know, it's game, set, match at that point, unfortunately. Ahmadzi said he didn't know his date of birth and claimed he was 18 when he is in fact 21. There's a lie. There's a lie. Seemingly to try and make it seem more normal, right? He's got, I don't know exactly how old the victim was. I don't believe this article actually says. But she's obviously a teen. She's obviously a teen. So maybe he's trying to, again, make him seem just like on the cusp of, you know, acceptability in this person's eyes, right? And that he's going to be the older boyfriend that's going to take care of her or whatever. But he starts off the interaction with a lie. No surprise, right? Oh, she was age 17, sorry. Yes, she was age 17. So trying to make it seem a little bit more normal. Yeah, there's only a little bit of thing between us. There's only a little bit of gap between us, you know, when in reality there's several years, right? She told the police he was a stranger who spoke with a foreign accent, stopped in front of her and asked if she had a boyfriend. She said when she replied that she did not, he told me that he was my boyfriend now. Classic example of you know, this is a classic grooming tactic, right? This is a classic grooming tactic. And we know that, very sadly, our authorities, if they'd seen this, they wouldn't have questioned this whatsoever. You had social workers that were at the nikah, and I'm not saying anything I shouldn't be saying there, nikah ceremony, the Islamic wedding ceremony, right? That's what I'm saying, YouTube. So don't get pulling this, or nobody taking this and saying that I didn't say anything, saying that it's something else that I didn't say, right? And that the social worker was there at this wedding ceremony, quote unquote, when they knew that she was being abused and that she was being forced into it. She had no choice in the matter, right? And being abused by the family and all manner else, not just by the boyfriend in question, but by the family as well. This is awful. The victim said she was struggling with mental health issues at the time. No doubt she's going to be struggling with a lot more now. And sometimes went for a walk at night and listened to music. As they then walked towards a play park with an arm around her waist, his other hand was touching her breast. So instantly then you can see where this is going to go. I'm not going to read any more, ladies and gentlemen, but the one thing I will say is that she tried to pull away from him 3 times. When she did, he pulled her more towards him. And then obviously when they were in a secluded place, he inflicted this unspeakable atrocity. Awful. Awful. Victim was physically shaking, crying, and hyperventilating. John Donald told the High Court in Edinburgh that when the victim approached him, her hands and arms were shaking. He said, I felt a sense of scaredness. The size difference between the male and the female was noticeable. The female was little and the male was bigger. The female came up to me at this point. She was physically shaking and immediately asked for help. She was crying by this time. She was really struggling to catch her breath. It was like she was hyperventilating. She told me she needed help and asked her to walk her somewhere. Thank God she was able to get the help, because God knows what would have happened then if she wasn't able to get the help and that this guy ended up grabbing her and taking her somewhere. You know, God knows what would have happened to her. But this is one case, ladies and gentlemen, the really stark thing that, again, really highlights that, you know, you say things like this, you just get called racist, you just get called all manner of labels. This place in Scotland had a population from this approximate area of the world of 0.3%. The wider area has a population of this area of the world of 0.2%. Then it's entirely possible, based on the population, based on the way the math breaks down, that this guy was either one of a few, right, or potentially the only one in this area that that was a rapist. Funny that. Funny that, ladies and gentlemen. And in fact, one thought just came to my mind, which I want to see if I can find. I talked about this a good few episodes ago. Remember that gang that came up in Rill? Remember that gang that came up in Rill, ladies and gentlemen? Well, I mentioned that one guy before went and actually looked at the population statistics in the ONS area of Rill. I remember these 4 men in North Wales, ladies and gentlemen, in Rill was operating a child trafficking ring. Mustafa Iqbal, Mohammed Usman Arshad, Zayala Badshah, and Jaswanda Singh, right, were operating in this area. And then when the ONS map was done, it was only about 4.3% of Rill's southwest population at the time was Asian. Doing the Asian men filter would bring this to 1 in 24 have been arrested for child abuse, and then the ratio would increase to 1 in 3 when filtering specifically on Pakistani, Indian, and Bangladeshi men. We cannot pretend now that this is not a problem. We cannot pretend that this is not a problem. How many? How many more? How many more? Now I can't find the actual post that I wanted to make sure is linked down below. Oh, that's annoying. Let me see if I can... yeah, this doesn't want to work. Okay, I'll see if I can find it now. And this is, again, not seemingly an isolated incident, ladies and gentlemen, because we've had so many reports coming in recently. One of which, again, does hit quite close to home, because this happened in Cardiff. This happened in Cardiff, this next one. Asylum seeker strangled and assaulted woman in petrifying attack. She's now saying she has nightmares. Not surprised. Living in Cardiff, mind you, is just enough to do that to you. But, you know, the way the things are changing and have changed. But an asylum seeker left his victim unable to sleep after he strangled and assaulted her under a bridge. Fawaz Al-Sameu followed the woman out of a nightclub before he tried to strangle her and put his hands under her dress. The victim was heading home from Pulse nightclub in Cardiff city centre to the student area at 4 a.m. when she noticed she was being followed. Presumably, therefore, she's a university student. So, again, not long, maybe just gotten out of her teens herself. The Syrian refugee waited until the woman was underneath a railway bridge before he grabbed her by the neck, forced his hand under her dress, and groped her whilst assaulting her for 7 seconds. Now, that may seem as though, 7 seconds, it's, you might want to downplay that, especially the lefties will try to downplay that. But the whole experience here is one that never, ever should have happened. Because what is a Syrian refugee doing in my country? What is a Syrian doing in my country, full stop? They're no longer refugees, ladies and gentlemen. I was under the impression that they were fleeing Assad, right? The very evil Assad regime, which was persecuting Christians and persecuting all other manner of minority, using chemical weapons, or it might have been biological weapons. I can't remember the exact difference. You know, this horrific dictator, right? This horrific Ba'athist dictator. But he was deposed a good while ago. So how can you, shouldn't that mean that they lose refugee status? They can now go back home. The evil dictator has been, deposed. Shouldn't they be going back to Jolani's Islamic paradise? What is he doing in Cardiff city centre as a quote-unquote refugee assaulting young women? It's disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. Why isn't he like, okay, here's your plane ticket, go back to Jelani's Islamic paradise and never come back? It's what you wanted. Prosecutor Tabitha Walker said the terrified victim managed to push her attacker away before fleeing the scene and alerting police. Thank God. Thank God it didn't end up going further. The victim said the assault continued to affect her mental health. I'm always looking over my shoulder and thinking the worst. At the start, I didn't leave my house for 6 weeks. I feel really uneasy when it's dark outside. Think about it now, ladies and gentlemen. It's starting to get very dark very soon now, isn't it? It's only going to make it very, very worse in these winter months for this poor young lady. It has really affected my social life, and I don't go out like I used to. I suffer with my mental health generally, but this incident really hit that harder. I'm not surprised. Here is the guy in question. Ladies and gentlemen, just, mind you, don't be, saying anything offensive now. Just as British, just as Welsh as you and me. Just as Welsh as you and me. Remember, Plaid Cymru say being Welsh is just all about belonging. Maybe we just need to do more to make this guy feel more like he belongs and, he'd be Welsh and so on. And again, this is what you see now. It's indicative of what's happening in the cities, ladies and gentlemen, because the cities are the epicenter for this. But we're seeing now it's trickling down into smaller townships, hamlets, and valley communities as well. I can barely sleep, and I have nightmares relating to it. I'm working on getting over it, but this isn't something you can just recover from. The impact is probably back from doing everyday things and stop me from going out with my friends. Never, ever should have happened. Because he never should have been in the country. Never, ever should have been in the country. Why wasn't he, this guy seems like he would be prime candidate to pick up an AK-47 and go fight for his country's freedom if it matters so much. There's people out there at the moment, women, children, especially the minority communities, Christians, Jews, all the rest of it, that are suffering unspeakable atrocity, right? Now that Assad's gone. Not even saying that he was a good guy or anything like that whatsoever, but I don't think you can make the argument that what's come after, what's come now is any better, right? But surely this guy felt so strongly about it. Shouldn't he have been one of the ones fighting for the freedom of his nation? No, he was over here, likely, based on the stats, leeching off the taxpayer and doing horrific things to our women. Makes you question a lot, don't it, ladies and gentlemen? And not to mention the ones that we are importing, ladies and gentlemen, that we do have to suspect are sharing outright terrorist ideals, which is what the government seem to be doing, not only with the Afghans that they fraudulently let into the country, right? Despite many of them being shown not to have helped our forces in any way, but as I covered before, again, Afghan culture, not something we should be importing, right? And people are always going to bring their culture with them, right? For the most part. Gazan students who've been allowed to come here, right, have now been allowed to bring their families. They were initially told, or we were initially told, that this was not going to be allowed, right? That it was going to be for people to receive medical treatment or whatever, for people that genuinely needed help. Oh, funny how then it's like, we're just going to allow their families to come in. And it was a complete reversal of government policy. So the students took up places in September under special arrangements agreed by the Home Office. They've now taken up special places at universities after reversal of government policy. So referring to the families and everything here. There's now what we're bringing here. So we have Manar Al-Hubi, for example, a prospective student, previously said she could not leave her children and husband behind in Gaza to take up her scholarship in Glasgow. I'm sorry, that just seems a little bit unfortunate. So now that means we need to bring in people from some of the most radicalized areas of the world to our country, right? And we think that what? We think that there's not going to be any problems with this. Think that however many students we're gonna bring in, right? And the people that they bring in with them, what's the odds? Given that how many of the Palestinians do seem to support Hamas, right? So the odds are we're going to be bringing in, worst case, right, or best case rather, just people that want to escape that. Best case scenario would be people that want to escape that, don't like Hamas, right? That would be the best case scenario. But the worst case scenario, we're going to be bringing in literal smuggled Hamas operatives. That's going to be the worst case scenario. Do you want that? Do you honestly want that? The government wants it. Again, make it make sense, but then you remember, oh shit, you have a radical Muslim Home Secretary who believes in genociding all of the Jews in the Middle East and the State of Israel, right? Most international students were banned from bringing dependents to Britain as part of a crackdown on immigration by Rishi Sunak's government. Crackdown on immigration when obviously the Conservatives saw the greatest increase in immigration that we've ever seen. Or one of the greatest increases that we've ever seen anyway. And Labour said it had no plans to lift the ban. The government now said it will support the evacuation of dependents on a case-by-case basis, with dependents needing to meet certain conditions, including they can cover their living costs. This whole thing just reeks. This whole thing just reeks, ladies and gentlemen. And again, we've seen how our open border has been exploited. We've seen our open borders being exploited by smuggling gangs, right? To smuggle drugs, to smuggle people, right? No doubt it's being exploited by foreign governments to smuggle literal terrorists. Now we're literally saying we'll bring them in. We'll bring them in. And the other thing is, we do have to regard everybody from this area of the world with at least a veneer of suspicion. We do. It's a national security issue. It's a national security issue. So you see how radicalized a lot of the people in these areas of the world are. You saw that after October the 7th when the captured prisoners were being taken through the streets of Gaza in vehicles by the Hamas operatives, and they were cheering. They were trying to like slap the bodies and so on, or the person that was in the back of the truck, whether they were alive or dead. The one image that came out of the hostage that was kept underground, his name escapes me at the moment, but looks like he's been starved to death and he'd been underground digging his own grave. This is horrific. It's absolutely horrific stuff. And you can say all these things and be against Israel as well, by the way. You say all these things and be against the Israeli government and have concerns about foreign influence and all of these other things. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can be against them and not like what they're doing with regards to leveling entire, cities and stuff like that, or leveling entire Gazan towns. You can absolutely be against that, right? There is no cap on the number of children, but the students will have to show that they can support them financially. How would they already be doing it is the question. Are they already coming here on scholarship? Are they already coming here because they can afford it? Are they able to apply? I don't know, would they be able to apply for student finance and stuff like that? We all know the government will rig the system however they want to ensure a political aim is fulfilled. So I don't know. That's pure speculation. It's pure speculation. But I don't think I'm the only one that's made uneasy about that there could be masses of people flooding in from this area of the world, and we know how radical it is. Everything being done here, ladies and gentlemen, by a government that has turned its back on the British people for generations, as you know. And another thing that boiled over recently, ladies and gentlemen, which is important to consider, and why now we're moving into main part of it now, where it's not just asylum seekers. It's not just people who are coming over as first generation, right? We now have serious homegrown problems. We have serious British-born problems. So in connection with a horrific stabbing that happened in Huntingdon Station, right, recently, CCTV footage, by the way, I don't think has yet been released, but I'm hoping it does. Certain bits of CCTV footage have been released showing people running away and showing the assailant walking the platform with a knife. But two initial males got arrested, a black male and then a male of Caribbean descent. I believe the male of Caribbean descent has since been released, right? I believe he's since been released. They were detained in custody on suspicion of attempted murder after stabbings on a train later stopped at Huntingdon Station. And this is Sky News, the superintendent, what's his name? John Lovelace, clarifying who the actual, at least one of the perpetrators seemed to be.
Within 8 minutes of the 999 call being made, 2 men were brought into police custody, where they remain this morning. I can tell you that these are the first male, a 32-year-old male, a black British national, and a 35-year-old man, a British national of Caribbean descent. They were both arrested on suspicion of attempted murder. Both were born in the United Kingdom. As stated, they remain this morning in separate police stations for questioning.
Sorry about that, guys. You would have seen a double transition there because I accidentally hit it twice. Now, the biggest thing that people are latching onto when people were speculating, oh my God, is this another one of the things that we've seen very, very recently in a pattern, right? Pattern of behavior. Did this person just come off a boat? Is this person exactly who we thought it was? Was there, people were speculating that there were shouts of Allahu Akbar, there was conflicting reports. I don't think that part was actually true in the end, although I could be wrong. I've seen some people saying that no, it was not true, but then some people, like Grok, for example, was saying that there were claims that people heard things like Allahu Akbar, right? But what you're seeing there, ladies and gentlemen, is that, you know, you have people here of foreign descent that were born here and then went on, for whatever reason, to commit this heinous crime. No doubt they'll be trying to pull the mental health card and everything like that, I would imagine. But now we're moving into a much more uncomfortable reality to discuss, given that we've had generations now of mass migration, given that, you know, people that were allowed to come here despite the public protesting time and time again, potentially even having riots over in many instances, people not wanting it, right? You're now seeing the fruits of that coming to bear, it seems, for whatever reason. The reality is whatever generation of immigrant this person was, or is rather, whatever generation it is, if whenever the generation was allowed here, wasn't allowed here, this attack would not have happened. Difference being is that the British people never wanted masses of these people from these areas of the world to come here. We were perfectly fine. We were doing perfectly fine as it was. This was something, ladies and gentlemen, in particular, you know, in particular intensity, in particular magnitude, was dubbed a Code Plato. Code Plato meaning marauding terror attack. That's what it was dubbed in this instant. This is where GB News in this instance was, I believe, confirming that this was dubbed a Code Plato marauding terror attack incident.
Be clear, we are not speculating here. I'm reading a report from the Daily Mail at the moment that has stated in their report that a code Plato has been used in this incident by senior officers. And this is the supposedly, and I don't know this, so I'd like for you to help me clarify here, the name given to marauding terror attacks. The code word was used allegedly in the wake of the Manchester synagogue stabbing. This, of course, will be not the news people want to hear, which, of course, would be that this is an incident that would be far more serious than we are currently aware of.
And obviously people are latching on to how much of a problem this is now is because of the fact that the assailant, I'm using assailant singular in this instance because, like I said, I believe since they were arrested, the 35-year-old Caribbean male was released. The difference being now is that we have these problems from people who were allowed here at one point but have now been born in Britain, and that's what many are now latching onto, to say that it's not, you know, migrant crime or immigrant crime. And obviously the person coming here would not be of the native, you know, bands of British people. Right, the distinct ethnic groups that made up the British people going back thousands of years. So we have much wider problems to contend with now. Axel Rudakabana was born here. Does that mean that he was British, just as British as you and me when he went on to commit the Southport attack? And that's obviously why they tried to try and make him out that he was a Welsh choir boy, right? No. Of course it doesn't. But yet you'll be arrested, or at least the BBC and the police will want to arrest you. As Joe Marsh pointed out, one of the things that the BBC wanted to get him arrested for was that in the aftermath of Southport, after pointing out, by the way, that that would have happened in Cardiff had the family not been moved, right? That would have happened in Cardiff, and maybe then some people might have changed their tune, right? Never wanted that. Obviously, nobody ever wanted Southport to happen, make no mistake about it. Everything that people have been protesting about is to prevent things like that. People then try to say that it has nothing to do with immigration or whatever. And many people always try to obfuscate away from potential religious reasons as well by saying that he was born here and he's, you know, a British national. And in many ways, we have to see it now as a disgusting blood libel against the British people, against the native British people. Because people who are from different areas of the world where they descend from in terms of their ancestry are now being grouped in with the horrific crimes of those people when they have nothing to do with it. It's awful. Which is why, ladies and gentlemen, we do need to have bigger conversations about the communities that were allowed to come here legally. We don't know if this person had family that came here legally or illegally, or maybe they came into some kind of refugee status or whatever it is. Currently don't know. We need to have a conversation in Britain, specifically in Britain, about the nature of some of these communities that have been, quote unquote, born here, or whose descendants now have been born here, and really the implications that British society has because of those communities. And things like this going to keep happening. And the politicians campaigning on foreign interests, as well, as we'll get onto in a moment, only make things even worse. We're showing here that a lot of people have either no love for Britain, no want to see it improve, no want to be a part of the society. In many ways, they want to see it crumble, they want to see it fall, they want to see the people of Britain harmed, and all of these things. And this goes far further than just when somebody, arrived on a boat, or, they've been instilled into this mentality by parents and so on. We have serious problems, ladies and gentlemen, with our politicians that have opened the gates massively to people who largely don't like us, and that the school system and everywhere else has groomed them into not liking us even more. This is as well the footage, ladies and gentlemen, that has come out. I'm going to play it on mute for you. This is the footage that has apparently come out of the assailant in question. And let's just see if I can pull up this Daily Mail article to see if it has the assailant's name. Here we go. I think this might be... Yeah, this might be the right guy. So Anthony Williams, 32, of Peterborough, has appeared at Peterborough Magistrates Court charged with 11 counts of attempted murder. Police say that a passenger was stabbed at a pontoon Docklands Light Railway station in East London shortly before 12:45 a.m. on November 1st. The victim suffered facial injuries after being attacked with a knife. Hours later, Williams is accused of going on a knife rampage on the high-speed LNER service from Doncaster to London's King's Cross. I'm not 100% sure if this is the same incident, but the images that I have are the same. The article will be linked down below, ladies and gentlemen, but here is the footage of what people allege to be Anthony Williams terrorizing people with a knife in a barbershop the day before this attack, which left 11 people injured. So I'll bring this up on screen for you now, ladies and gentlemen. Here is the alleged assailant with, I'm not sure where this is from. I believe this is outside the barbershop in this instance, right? And it's not long after this. I don't know whether he sees somebody. He seems to make eye contact with someone, or I don't know, maybe somebody made a gesture towards him asking him what he's doing. He doesn't seem to be doing much, maybe feels threatened. Here we go. There's the knife. And I believe this is where he walks into the barbershop, and there he is. He's stood in there now. People are running away. I'm not sure what he's saying. Obviously, he's clearly trying to articulate something and say something. But then this is allegedly this is the guy that's been brought in for to be tried, it seems, in Peterborough Magistrates Court, charged with 11 counts of attempted murder. This is somebody who's quite clearly not of native British descent, but people are trying to, again, it is akin to a blood libel in many ways, in my opinion, ladies and gentlemen, how they'll try, and now my web page is frozen. Give me 2 seconds, ladies and gentlemen. They'll try and group this person in with the British people, right, to try and obfuscate away from no likelihood this person doesn't have ancestry in Britain going back thousands of years. Obfuscate away from what is increasingly becoming a blindingly obvious thing with regards to certain demographics being massively overrepresented in certain crime stats and whatever, because of culture, because of worldview, because of our own ideology and how much they are perpetually told that they're victims by the school system, all of the diversity, equity, inclusion narratives, the belonging stuff, right? It's like the fruits of the globalist utopian system, ladies and gentlemen. And it's truly, there's so many examples. Seems like close to Halloween, there's just so many examples that have come out recently. It's just a horror story, ladies and gentlemen. It's not just in Britain either. It is in Europe as well, as we'll get on to with our next one in a moment. But this is where we need to now have a serious conversation about demographics, about populations, and about communities within this country, right, that are quote-unquote British-born, that we are still seeing many ways they either don't want to integrate or assimilate or anything like that. But in many ways, and again, the British public, this is the thing that always comes back to, the British people, when they have resoundingly objected to it for generations, and our politicians did it anyway, we always go on about atoning for historic injustice and that we need to atone for whatever historic injustices come from slavery and all the successful integration stories that the BBC and everybody likes to run, like Lenny Henry and all the others. They're now campaigning for trillions in reparations and whatever else. Right, these quote-unquote successful integration stories. When are the historic injustices of the British people going to be rectified? When are the last 100 years, right, nearly 100 years of what could be argued is slow decline from traitorous governance going to be rectified? When are the crimes against the young girls of this nation, successive generations of them going back to the 50s, going to be rectified? When are these historic injustices that the British people's vote, you could argue, has meant nothing for the last 80 to 100 years, going to be rectified? If we can quote-unquote rectify, even though they already have been rectified, historic wrongs from 200 years ago, then surely we can rectify historic wrongs from 100 years ago. I still don't think enough people are ready for that conversation, however. Many of them, because they've been, indoctrinated into thinking that there's no thing that could not be done to them that they don't deserve. The young British boys in particular, men in particular, that are being told they're inherent oppressors of women and, they have inherent unearned privilege because of their race and so on in schools. They make a generation of victims that seemingly then go on to become serious victimizers. And the British people never asked for it. British people never wanted it. Had it forced on them. if there are calls to rectify, 200 or 250-year-old injustices, depending on where you're going, depending on where you're going back to. If you're going back to the founding of America, they'll say you got to, atone for historic injustices for what happened to Native American populations and so on. Hell, we got to be told that we're evil oppressors because of the conquistadors and Cortez and so on. If we nowadays have to, quote-unquote, atone for those historic injustices, why don't others have to atone for far more recent historic injustices? Food for thought. Because as I said, ladies and gentlemen, not an isolated incident. Poor Spanish girl recently, at least I think it's a Spanish girl anyway, was gang raped by a gang of 4 North African migrants after they were found and arrested on suspicion of gang raping and robbing a student who was found abandoned and semi-conscious on a park footpath. The Algerian men were living in illegal tents and dodged expulsion orders from the Spanish authorities. Think about that next time you see the Kingdom of Kubala people laying curses on Scottish houses and saying they're not going to leave. Maybe have a think about that, right? Despite at least 3 of them being told they had to leave the country, they never did. They were arrested on Tuesday and an investigating judge remanded them in prison until October 30th. The group protested their innocence, but the judge concluded there were inconsistencies in their statements. The alleged victim's phone and underwear is said to have been found at the illegal camp in the northern Spanish city of Pamplona, where they were living. The camp by the river Arga, which has been pictured in the local press, has now been dismantled. That's a good start. Police have launched a manhunt for the student's sex attackers after she was found by passers-by last Friday night. She's thought to have been heading home from a university party when she was intercepted. The judge who caged the men, aged between 25 and 33, described in a prison ruling how the young woman, whose age has not been made public... Actually, that's a couple of questions, don't it? Well, yeah, she was going home from a university party, so we can assume at least that she would be over 18. Was found abandoned on a footpath on top of leaves, helpless, confused, and semi-conscious. Remember the Ross Kemp. Remember the Ross Kemp video, ladies and gentlemen, when he was talking to what appears to be African migrants, and he was talking about, and all stuff like that. And it's an iconic, very, eye-opening video that they had no concept. They had absolutely no concept of, what this attacks like this could do to the victim. Do you remember they were saying like, oh, what about the consequences of the attack? And they're like, oh yeah, it's not good. She could get pregnant, or I could get, an STD or something. Like I could get some kind of infection. And they're like, what about, the effects on the girl? It'd be like, oh yeah, well, she could end up with the baby, and then she got to find a way to, provide for it and so on. And he was like, no, what about the effects on hers and like her mental health? And they're just like, huh? They'll call it, our authorities in Britain will call it, quote unquote, racial profiling. But at what point is it just, at least in certain areas, do you just call it pattern recognition? You just call it pattern recognition. Speaking of pattern recognition, ladies and gentlemen, we spent nearly 40, how many minutes on this now? Nearly an hour. This is just the first part of the show, ladies and gentlemen. So many examples came out just over the last few days. This one's from October the 30th. The one I just read out is from Halloween. The one before that was November 1st. Couple before that, ladies and gentlemen, was, again, 30th of October. All of this stuff that I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, is just in the last couple of days. 3 men charged with child sexual offences in Rochdale. The men have been bailed and will appear at Manchester and Salford Magistrates Court next year. They've been bailed, ladies and gentlemen. Naveed Anwar, Mohammed Abdul Sami, and Dilwar Ali. Anwar faces charge of a girl aged 13 to 15 and of a woman aged 16 or over. We're calling women at 16 now. We're calling that now. Mohammed Abdul Sami has been charged with a rape of a girl aged 13 to 15 and a rape of someone aged 16 or over. And Dilwar Ali has been charged with 2 counts of rape of a girl aged 13 to 15 and 1 count of assault by penetration. They won't appear in court. They've been bailed, ladies and gentlemen. They won't appear in court until March 19th next year. Merry Christmas, Rochdale. You now have these people residing back in your communities. But obviously they couldn't keep them in custody, ladies and gentlemen, because they know that their fellow community would riot. Like they literally did, mind you, outside Rochdale police station when one of the community was arrested. I can't remember the exact offences he was arrested for. Bear in mind, all of these men, ladies and gentlemen, are over 40. All of these men, ladies and gentlemen, are over 40, and they've been charged with aged 13 to 15, raping girls aged 13 to 15 and 16, just over 16 or over. Bailed. Yet Lucy Connolly done 31 months in prison for a tweet or for a post. Wayne O'Rourke has just been released from prison for social media posts in the aftermath of Southport, where he was fully vindicated. Be it child rapists, or at least charged child rapists, yet to be convicted, walk free on bail. How interesting is that? For all the big things you say about him, right? For all the things you say about Tommy Robinson, is that he had his appeals denied and everything like that, and he had to spend his time in solitary simply for releasing a film about the Syrian refugee and about the treatment of Bailey and his family, Bailey McLaren and his family, right? Highlighting how the media went to cover it up, highlighting the cover-ups that occurred at all levels of council, that people were paid 5-figure sums. People were paid 5-figure sums to cover up things, right? Or at least to not tell the truth. He had to spend all that time in solitary. Again, Lucy Connolly had to serve her sentence. Wayne O'Rourke had to serve his. Active Patriot had his door bashed down, right? And his house completely left exposed for 24 hours. Yet these guys, charged with child, walk free. They're not a threat to your community. But yet, the people who post social media posts about certain things are. Meanwhile, ladies and gentlemen, people talk about foreign influence in politics and foreign influence in elections, foreign influence in all manner of things. Can we talk about foreign influence when it comes to our own MPs? Like I said, ladies and gentlemen, many people who have come here, they come here under the illusion that they want to do good for Britain. They want to exploit Britain for their own gain. They want to exploit the British people as they do so. You now have, this is from GB News, London councillors caught campaigning to be MPs in Bangladesh for the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Everyone is a nationalist for where they come from, it seems. Hamza Yusuf saying he's a son of the soil in Pakistan. And now you have, it's fine when they do it. Now you have London councillors campaigning to be MPs in Bangladesh. A series of councillors have been caught campaigning to stand as MPs in Bangladesh. Multiple councillors in Tower Hamlets are seeking nominations to stand in Bangladesh's general election next February. Sabina Khan and Ohid Ahmed have been named as those throwing their hat in the ring abroad. Ms. Khan defected from Labour to the Aspire party, led by convicted election fraudster Luftar Rahman last year. The Aspire party controversially fielded only Bangladeshi or Bangladeshi heritage candidates at the last local elections in 2022. I love how it's fine when they do it. I love how it's fine when they put their own people forward. It's fine when they decide to cast off the illusions of diversity and all the rest of it and put their interests first. Oh, it's absolutely fine when they do it, but we're racist, we're xenophobic, we're Islamophobic, we're intolerant, we're bigots if we do the same? Seems like it might just be a matter of putting your own interest, your own national interest forward first, ladies and gentlemen, in the interest of the security, safety, and continued existence of your own people and your own nation. Funny that. Despite holding multiple council committee roles, Ms. Khan failed to show up to more than half of the meetings she was meant to attend. One local told the newspaper she cannot answer constituents' concerns because she was abroad. Another blasted, "We elected her to represent us, not Bangladesh. Maybe not a good idea to elect a foreigner." Ladies and gentlemen, that's just the reality. That's just where we are at this point. And if you're in a place now where you have no say but to elect a foreigner because you get outvoted by foreigners, understand that that is colonization. That it was always colonization that was the goal. At the time, Ms. Khan has been running a Facebook page named Sabina Khan for Golapganj and Biani Bizar, I don't know how you even fucking say that, Bina Bazar, to campaign for the Bangladesh National Party. This is apparently what the lefties view as Britain first, or, you know, global. These are your global citizens here, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ms. Khan. And now we have our own councillors campaigning to be leaders of the Bangladeshi Nationalist Party. Well, I say, if it's fine for them, it's fine for us. The path of change begins at home, she's quoted in saying. Thank you, Fulbar Union. And the other guy also defected to Aspire from Labour before ditching a party altogether last year. And you're clearly seeing there as well how bending over backwards for these people doesn't work, ladies and gentlemen. How appeasing these people doesn't work. Because what happened here, ladies and gentlemen, they used the Labour Party for as long as they could, and then the minute it was more advantageous for them to defect, they did so. Right? Clearly showing it was never about being part of a political party that has to lie to people and convince them that they're going to do the best for Britain, but obviously that they're not. Right? The minute, and we'll get onto this a little bit later when we talk about how some of the lefties have turned on Mike Tapp, of all people, simply because he said we shouldn't have foreign criminals and sex offenders in Britain. I'll get onto that at the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned. The minute it becomes more advantageous for them to do so, the minute they can't use it anymore, or the minute, again, it's more expedient for them to go down a different path, they'll go. Because they're not operating in Britain's interests, and they're not operating in the interests of her people. Because they're not of Britain or her people. That is just the reality. The betrayal of our politicians knows no end, ladies and gentlemen. Very sadly. Because as you'll see now, there's been a concerted effort, like I said, this was a big thing with Joe Marsh as well, a concerted effort to get rid of the native British person. Very, very concerted effort to do so. And that has come from all manner of different ways, from encouraging us to remove ourselves from the gene pool, to, again, conning people out of having future generations saying big families are bad, the feminist movement and all other things, right? One of the big people that even the quote-unquote party of the working man, as many people seem to believe they are, Labour and Conservatives not really being too much different in the last 10, 15 years, has been of the elderly, people who've broke their back for this nation, people who've paid taxes all their lives under the impression that they were going to get that back when they retired. How quickly, ladies and gentlemen, things have turned against them. How quickly it seems when it comes time to pay those pensions out, all of a sudden you see the government broadening the scope on euthanasia. Broadening access and encouraging access to euthanasia or medical assistance in dying. seemingly to do everything they can. COVID as well, where all manner of obviously elderly person died alone and terrified in these homes and whatever, as their relatives weren't allowed to see them. But not only that, what comes after? It's quite clear what they're trying to do, ladies and gentlemen, why they're trying to go down the path that they are of eliminating the elderly British people after taking everything from them over the course of their lifetime. It's so they can then push foreigners into the residential homes that they used to reside in, so that they can import more of a foreign voting bloc and put them in places that are, well, now they've served their purpose, right? But the underhandedness, the evil of it all is not to be understated, ladies and gentlemen. The betrayal that it is not to be understated. This is from Truth Hurts on X. A former elderly care centre has now been turned into a migrant accommodation. The covenant saying it has only been used for the elderly has obviously been ignored. And as you try to go in and report on it, ladies and gentlemen, the police will then arrive with the blue lights on to assist in a civil matter, but also look at who the security for this place is, ladies and gentlemen. When I say that we now, particularly in England, but we have foreign enclaves, right? Essentially foreign military bases that are guarded by foreigners, I'm not lying to you. I'm not lying to you. This is the clear-cut evidence of that.
Lovely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You need to go out.
Please don't touch.
You need to go out.
Please don't touch.
You need to go out.
Are you right to just have a chat?
No, I can't have
What are you
time
doing? What are you hiding for?
Joe, you need to step out, man.
What?
You need to go out.
Who you are?
Can't we just have a chat? Is that all right?
No.
Guys, basically, there was 600 proposals against this place. Visitors to the lines during the hours of darkness. A lot of running round going on, isn't there? Nice and warm in there.
He said there were 600 proposals against this as well. That says a lot.
Staying here. Is that an unaccompanied child back there?
Hi, guys.
Hello. Yeah, who do you work for?
KCC. So
The council?
Yeah, he's like to go.
You're a council worker.
He's like to go, please. Thank you. You're okay. Can you call the police, please? 3 9s, please.
3 9s?
Yeah, thank you very much.
And council worker says it all, ladies and gentlemen, says it all about the complicity of local authorities as well. And instantly, the emergency call goes in. The emergency call goes in. And obviously the police will be there in seconds. The police will be there in seconds because they're political enforcement agents. But as you can see, they'll do everything they can, clear out all the elderly, in many instances, by killing them, and then flood it with foreigners, and then they'll scatter them into our communities. Not only what they'll do to us as a people, right? Many of them will do to us as a people, but because they are foreign voters. They are voter units to our politicians. They are being used, and that's why some of them, many of whom, you know, might have, I do try to keep some level of empathy in many ways for people who've got caught up in this, even people who've come under legal immigration that have nonetheless been used as political units. They've nonetheless been not seen necessarily as people. They've been seen as political voter units. The fact of the matter is they're being used to erode and get rid of your vote. Like I said this before, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a set community of a certain number of people, right, let's just say you elect one representative from a community and you have 1,000 people or 100 people, let's just go with easy math, 100 people that are in this little constituency, and everybody has a vote on who they want to represent them. Well, that means everybody's vote counts for 1%, right? Now, obviously, then, if you have certain people that don't vote, that essentially means that the people who do vote, their vote kind of matters more because those people have removed themselves from the vote share, but you all have the same vote share. easy way to explain it as well is if you have like 4 people, you have a cake, you each have a certain amount of cake, right? But then if you have 8 people, all of a sudden, everybody's share gets a lot less. Well, imagine that share is now your voting power. The say that you have in the vote, in the outcome, is a lot less. That's why you need to be concerned, ladies and gentlemen. Not whether it be skin colour necessarily. Not because it'd be the same if it was Eastern Europeans or French people or whatever. It'd be the same if it was all of them. Wherever these people are coming in from, en masse, they are being used to take your only recourse away for changing any outcome at this point. Because the other outcome was given away when the Brits gave their guns away. And that's just the reality. That's why you see the conversation popping up more and more and more. People now are seeing how much that Second Amendment matters. They're doing this deliberately by design so that you cannot get yourself out of what's coming democratically. It could be argued we can't get ourselves out of it democratically anyway. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that I am wrong. Because the government don't care. If the government cared, they would have stopped doing this a long time ago. They wouldn't say things like Plaid Cymru say, that there's no such thing as a Welsh person, essentially, that being Welsh isn't about ancestry, being Welsh isn't about who you are, it's about, you know, belonging and all of these other nebulous values and all of these things. In fact, I'll see if I can find the clip for a little bit later on. The government don't care. Everything that they're doing is with a specific goal in mind. And they're terrorizing our communities. It's why they release people early from prison, for example. Everything is cruelty to the innocent, because the innocent in this instance, just a regular British person, have been deemed as, you know, being guilty of crimes of historic injustice and so on. There's been a man freed under Labour's early release scheme that has since been charged with murder, and more than 38,000 offenders were freed under Shabana Mahmood's early release scheme between September and June last year. A man who was freed under Labour's early release prison's early release scheme has been charged with murder. The man was charged over an incident after his release early from jail. He was released to reduce overcrowding in prisons. Funny how they don't release any of the people that made social media posts. They don't release any people in prison for wrong think and wrong speak. No, they release murderers. That's great, isn't it? It is the most serious offence alleged to have been committed by a prisoner released in the early government release scheme established by Shabana Mahmood as Justice Secretary in September 2024. Standard determinate sentences 40 scheme was introduced last year as an emergency measure, allowing prisoners with fixed-term sentences to be released after serving 40% of their sentence rather than half of it. I believe I might have covered this story when that was actually taking place last year. I think I did. I think we covered who the victim was. Funny enough, how, ladies and gentlemen, when it comes to fast-track thought criminals through the justice system, when it comes to fast-track thought criminals through the courts, they very easily found a place. But yet we have to release people that then get, recharged with murder. And the government then pretend as though nothing is wrong. The government will then pretend that nothing is wrong and that even when other Labour ministers like Wes Streeting will say that there's a growing sense of despair in Britain, they'll say, no, really showing how out of touch that they are with the native people. But as we know, the classic saying goes, when the political class catch a cold, the working class catch pneumonia. And that's exactly what we're seeing. These people, they don't feel anything. They don't feel anything, not to mention because they don't feel anything for the British people that they hate and despise anyway, but they're far away from it all. In Westminster, they have their big fucking fences and armed guards, right? You know, go to Buckingham Palace, you have armed guards there. Did the young girls, did the families of the young girls who were at the victim, who were being victimized by the gangs have armed guards and big fences? No. They had accusations of racism and Islamophobia and There's no problems, apparently.
As we approach the budget. Your colleague Wes Streeting last week said that there is a growing sense of despair in Britain. Do you agree with him?
No, I don't actually. Look, there's a sense of times are still tough. There's a sense of impatience for the sort of change that people voted for 15 months ago. But people are recognising there are more appointments in the NHS now. They're recognising, particularly if they're low paid, that they've had a record increase in the wages. They're recognising that we've had 5 interest rate cuts since the election. And in my field, they're also recognising that this is a government, for instance, this week, delivering an £8 billion export deal for British fast jets to Turkey. And that's going to support 20,000 jobs over the next few years around the UK. So they can see a government, not just in the Treasury, but in other departments like mine, looking to drive economic growth, because in the end, that's going to make the difference to their living standard.
Just juxtapose that with your experience, ladies and gentlemen. As we know, the political class will piss on us and tell us that it's raining. How do you feel? Comment down below. How do you feel? Do you feel a growing sense of despair? I certainly do, with everything that we've read today, with everything that we've covered today. I don't know about you, I'm sick and tired of being pissed on and told that it's fucking raining. All right? But this just goes to show how out of touch people are, because people are feeling growing sense of despair, and rightfully so. And rightfully so, because government, they're seeing, they have eyes, they have ears, they have the ability to think. They're seeing how their country is being taken over. Obviously, it's the classic case of the liberal, like Harry Eccles, who recently blocked me on X. I thought that was quite funny. And Liz Webster and all of the others who called out Elon Musk, for example, who went on about the Shires in Britain recently. And all of a sudden then you have 500 men or 1,000 men dropped on you and they start raping all the kids and so on. And that the Shires were kept as they were because of good, hard men, right? Absolutely true, right? It's been good men that defended our nation from all manner of threats, right? But these people they champion multiculturalism and diversity and all of these other things with their pronouns in their bio and their trade unionist or trade socialist, whatever it is, and the blue sky links and so on, whilst living in greater than 95% white areas. It's funny how they can say that when they live in greater than 95% white areas, when they live overwhelmingly amongst their own people. Which is why, ladies and gentlemen, I talk about these things. I understand in many ways the relative position of kind of luxury that people like myself are in, that we live amongst our own people. Everybody around here pretty much knows each other on a first name basis, right? Or at least I know people in my hometown, pretty much everybody in my hometown on a first name basis anyway. Aside from the ways that it's kind of rather rapidly changing, which I don't like. But then it'd be easy for me to then be like, oh, look how great diversity is. Look how great multiculturalism is. The guy who owns the shop down the street, he's great. Then you go to Tower Hamlets, or you go to Luton, or you go to Manchester, or you go to all of these other places, like, oh, it's much different. You go to London, it's like, where, you have occurring every hour and record phone theft. And I think it was 2 men of foreign descent were found guilty of, I think, obtaining about 40,000 devices, I think it was, in London. Then you see multiculturalism in a complete different light. And you see that multiculturalism was, in fact, a complete and absolute lie, right? And what it was actually a cover for. I see a growing sense of despair, ladies and gentlemen, with Plaid Cymru on the rise, because they outright erase Welsh people from any kind of basis in reality. Plaid Cymru have basically said that there's no such thing as a Welsh person, which I find very alarming. The Party of Wales, mind you, as what their name is, that's what Plaid Cymru means, 2 days ago posted this on X. Being Welsh is not about where you were born or where your parents were or who your parents were, or the colour of your skin. Being Welsh is about belonging. We are the only party with a positive vision for the future. It's a future. Their vision for the future is like what fucking England has turned into, mind you. So take that when you take that into account, young Welsh man or woman, when you look at positive vision. Fighting for fairness and ambition, not for the Welsh person, because the Welsh person doesn't exist, ladies and gentlemen, because the people of Wales deserve better. Who's the people of Wales? Who's the people of Wales? Who's the people of Wales, Plaid Cymru? Can't tell us who, because you just said that there's no such thing as a Welsh person. So how can you have people of Wales but not have Welsh people? It's genocidal rhetoric, ladies and gentlemen. It should be taken extremely seriously, because make no mistake, they mean it.
I'd like to remind people of my journey. I am a loud southeast London girl, born and raised on the other side of Offa's Dyke. No Welsh family connection, but as a young woman, I came to Aberystwyth to study, and I found something extraordinary. I found a language that changed my life. I found a place where I belong. I found a community and communities that have welcomed me with open arms. I even found a patient husband. Dewi Wyn from Blaenau Ffestiniog. Diolch yn fawr iawn am yr holl ymynedd dros y blynyddoedd. So what I want to say, being Welsh is not about where you're born or who your parents were. It's not about the colour of your skin. Being Welsh is about belonging. It's about shared values, respect, solidarity and community. Gwynfor Evans said, and I think some of you will remember this, anybody can be Welsh. They just have to be willing to face the consequences.
So Plaid Cymru have platformed an English lady. So they talk about hating the English and everything like that. They've platformed an English lady which have completely come over and shat on any kind of Welsh heritage and Welsh ancestry and Welsh people. It's literally an example, ladies and gentlemen, except in a inter-community kind of scale where it's inside the United Kingdom. It's not like a Somali coming over and saying, here's what an American is, right? It's somebody coming over from England, right, and saying, no, here's what a Welsh person is. I thought that was the entire fucking grievance that people had with the English, was the English coming over and telling the Welsh what to do, or telling the Welsh who they are and what they are, right? Many people don't like the Union flag in Wales, for example, because it doesn't have the drag, it doesn't have the Welsh representation on it, because in the Union flag, Wales kind of engrossed in with England, right? Understand that grievance, right? But then the same separatists cheering on Plaid Cymru are platforming said English lady who is literally talking that you people don't exist. That being Welsh is not about who you are, where you're from, your ancestry, anything like that, and where your roots are. Anybody can be Welsh. Literally erased you from any kind of category. So shouldn't you be up in arms with Plaid Cymru, even if you're a separatist? If you're a true nationalist and you also hate the English, this should be doubly angry to you, anger-inducing to you. This should be doubly so. Because Plaid Cymru be like, hate the English and all of this stuff, and England should have to pay this, that, and the other. Okay, there's a conversation maybe to be had about our relationship with England and so on. Right. I certainly think we have bigger threats, bigger fish to fry than the English at the moment, and our relationship with the English, right? But now your party of Wales, which is separatist with regards to the Union, right, is platforming a lady who is outright mocking you and saying you don't exist. An English lady nonetheless. So surely, can you at least acknowledge at this point, some of you guys that are even on the left side of things, or seem to try and be nationalists, but have questions about some of your policies as well. You seem to just be more of the same eco-socialists a lot of the time. Can you maybe see that Plaid Cymru are not who they are exactly who they say they are? Maybe can you just believe them? And that it starts, by the way, with having a party representing you that understands who the Welsh are as a people and that actually acknowledge that the Welsh people exist. That fills me with a lot of despair, ladies and gentlemen, that the quote-unquote Party of Wales is not only for everybody but Wales, but they deny the Welsh people's existence. They deny the existence of a distinct Welsh people. Yet many quote-unquote nationalists will cheer them on because quote-unquote fuck the English. Yeah, there's an English lady in this instance that's telling you, let me tell you what a Welsh person is. Isn't that fantastic? Isn't that just fantastic? Now, getting into the last couple of things for today's show. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I'm filled you with too much despair, but it's only going to get worse. The schools, you really need to keep an eye on your schools, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you're in public schools. So, what's been going on at the moment, schools are basically, in many ways, at least with regards to their political bent, many of them being state-funded, obviously they push this hard left-wing propaganda, right, as we know. So much so, they'll say that the Liberal Democrats are a central party. How funny is that? They'll say that the Conservatives are centre-right, which if you know in practice, and you've seen their policies in practice, you know that's not true. And you want to look at how different it is when they compare the Greens to, say, Reform UK. It's very different. Look at this, right? This is apparently what was shown in a school in the UK. And it's right-wing versus left-wing in terms of political representation. On the right wing, you have Conservatives, UKIP, Reform, and eventually you get to Nazis and fascism, right? There's also the BMP on there as well, which is a little note. On the left wing, you have Labour, SNP, Plaid Cymru, Green Party, and then Communism. And then right in the middle, you have the Liberal Democrats. Obviously completely unrepresentative because the Liberal Democrats are just another flavour of the same leftists that we've seen time and time and time again. We know that. But take a look at the differences with how, say, for example, the Reform and UKIP party is represented versus, there's a nice voice break there, well done, George, versus how the Green Party is represented. We know the Green Party is even further to the left of Labour. That's the one thing they do get right in terms of the eco-socialist stuff, right? But they're even more, towards the communist end. But the words they use to describe it, right, they just use, main concern is the environment, but does have other left-wing views. Straight away with UKIP and Reform UK, then it says some supporters do have extremist views. So you're seeing there how it's instantly couched, right? So on the left wing, some supporters do have, extremist views, with regards to communism and stuff like that. But then the Green Party, which you can see on screen if you're looking now, main concern is the environment, but does have other left-wing views. Right, not to mention they literally eat the rich and, tax the already heavily taxed rich, which will just leave the country and leave it to pick up the freaking slack on the working classes, right? All of this stuff. But then there's nothing like what the Reform UK supporters are increasing. It was main concern is immigration and Islam or whatever. Nothing to do with just couching that. But, they do have, it might say main concern is economics or whatever. They're going to raise the income tax ceiling, for example, but do have other right-wing views or do have other conservative views. Now, just straight in, some supporters do have extremist views. Straight in. So you're seeing there, very, very subtle. Very, very subtle. But you're seeing there that students are being couched to think a certain way about politics, right? And it's completely false because obviously the Liberal Democrats are not down the middle whatsoever. But then you also have this one then, which is even arguably even more telling, and I won't be the first person usually to come to the defense of Richard Tice, for example. But literally here, the learning intentions for this lesson were to understand the views of Reform UK and how they have influenced far-right and extreme views, to explain the impact and the rise of the far-right and extreme views in society and why this is a serious concern, to identify ways young people can remain safe online against extreme content. Funnily enough, that'll be the government comes in and then you can't find footage of Wayne Broadhurst being attacked in broad daylight, for example. This way you see now, ladies and gentlemen, get your kids out of school. Now, obviously, this is just screenshots on X, so if anybody has more information about it, it'll be linked down below if they're actually genuine or whatever, or if you know what school this was in. It's probably in all of them. But you can clearly see, and this is because, schools are state-run, they want to push state-run propaganda, all of this stuff. that students who have no faculties or very few faculties to be able to discern whether this is true or false, what's right and wrong, etc., are being deliberately couched and groomed essentially to think a certain way based on false pretenses. Because, yeah, there are extremists on the right, absolutely, or there are people that are of the very far-right views, right? But I don't think you could say that they're in Reform UK, or potentially even in UKIP. You know, they're more like the civic nationalist types. You know, Reform UK has said that we basically need to politically accommodate Islam, for example. That's not something that any true right-winger would say. They want to preserve British society. They don't want to preserve Islamic society, because Islamic society has nothing to do with Britain. So you're seeing here how the school system is equally, or in many instances even more, to blame, because they want to churn out revolutionaries. They want to churn out revolutionaries for this mythical revolution, right? Straight out of 1984, right? And in many instances now, this where they bring in Tice up on screen and many of this, right, where they're bringing the figures of hate up on screen, they're literally doing the thing which they do in Orwell's story, where they do like the 2 minutes hate, right? They do the 2 minutes hate, and they're screaming at a picture of Goldstein, right, yelling all manner of things at him just to reinforce that he's the enemy of the state, right? You know, to keep on track, keep your mental processes on track, make sure you understand that we are always the good, they are always the bad, etc. And then when they bring Richard Tice up on screen, I'm not a fan of Richard Tice by any means. That's what they're basically doing. That's what they're basically doing. Because they'll say all manner of, you know, evil thing about Tice to young kids who don't have the ability to discern, right, that maybe the person speaking to them isn't being wholly truthful with them and is pushing a political narrative. And they'll be groomed in the same way that the spies in Orwell's story were groomed. It's really bad, ladies and gentlemen. The schools are a massive breeding ground for this. Right. Another thing, ladies and gentlemen, not to do with schools now. We're getting into more humorous, I don't want to say humorous, but, interesting stories now. Not even interesting. The video game community has been taking a surprising turn at the moment. Maybe think the one thing that our politicians shouldn't have done was pissed off the video game nerds, right? Their proficiency with technology, a lot of the things that they can do, right? Probably a bad idea. But now we have a new video game on the block, ladies and gentlemen. We have a new video game on the block that really encapsulates what's going on in the UK at the moment. Trailer has just dropped for it. It is called Raise the Colours. Raise the Colours, the video game. And I want you to watch this, ladies and gentlemen, because this has... there's some bits in it which are quite questionable, judging by the screenshots in the comments. But it's a game where you're on a timer and you have to go around putting up Union Jack and English flags. All the while, I'll leave it for you to see, actually. Who do you think tries to stop you? Who do you think tries to stop you? All right, that's enough of the silliness. That's enough of the silliness. But you can see now people are taking the piss out of it, right? Who do you see in that video clip? If you didn't watch it, ladies and gentlemen, it's like this, what's the game? Totally Accurate Battle Simulator. You had the weird enemies with like the googly eyes and stuff like that, and you could pit all different kind of weird, different types of characters against each other in this like battle simulator, and it was just this big giant meme, right? It's a bit like that. But it also is a little bit like, I don't know, like Robloxy. I don't know how they've made this, but It's completely comical, completely slapstick, and you play as a character going around putting up St. George's crosses and Union Jack flags, right? And the people who try to stop you, right? There's all different character customizations. There's one guy who's like a crusader. There's another one that has a Union Jack, like hijab thing. The people who try to stop you are dressed in high vises and obviously meant to be representative of council workers. So we're getting meme to fuck. This is the thing. Everything that's going on in Britain, ladies and gentlemen, is a meme to the rest of the world. And in many instances, I think people are now turning to making these comedic things as a coping mechanism. Some people have called it silly goose national. Silly goose nationalism. I like that. But you can see this is where Britain is turning into a meme on the world stage. It's obviously not good. It's obviously not good. But the only thing is, the reason why this will resonate with so many, ladies and gentlemen, reason why it will gain as much traction as it has, which I believe is 314,000 views on X at the moment, is because there's truth to it. There's truth to it. And that people are doing all manner of things to... This is the thing that people are now making kind of memes out of their suffering, so to speak. But this is where we are now. This is where we are. Video games being made about putting up St. George's crosses, putting up flags and stuff, all the while Kung Fu council workers, right, are trying to stop you and take them down. And it's just a really sad indictment. It is actually a really sad indictment on the UK because it's not even satire, I suppose. It's not even, a joke. It is a joke, but it's because the country's a joke. But it's a joke that's harmed and resulted in the deaths of many as well. Maybe we need to do things that are going to make us not be a joke on the world stage. Speaking of being jokes on the world stage, ladies and gentlemen, multicultural paradise of Manchester, Piccadilly Gardens, had this happen recently. You want to see the fruits of multiculturalism? You want to see how the liberal ideal really collapses when the chips are down and when oil and water really meet? In Manchester, in Piccadilly Gardens, we're always told how well people have integrated and how the cultures, they all coexist and so on. Our well-integrated migrants, ladies and gentlemen, have assaulted and are beating the shit out of 2 trans women. That's men masquerading as women, right? This is a really funny indictment. It's not funny when you see people getting attacked and all things like this, but these kinds of people, it's difficult to feel sorry for a lot of the time because they champion on these causes. This is really them being forced in this way, sadly, to reap what they sow. They sowed these seeds. Everyone who tried to warn them about culture, about how these people see these kinds of practices, about how they're not going to leave their culture and their practices behind when they come to this nation, right? That they're not going to be accepting of this stuff, that it's going to hurt you. Oh, you bigot. Oh, you racist, all of this stuff. They're now being forced to reap what they sow. I only hope it teaches them a very valuable lesson about the people that they simped for and the people that they scorned for trying to warn them exactly this thing would happen and will continue to happen if you continue to go down this path. Ladies and gentlemen, this is multiculturalism, inclusivity, diversity, and belonging at its absolute finest.
Whoa. That's Cozzy, that's Cozzy. No, whoa.
Not you! Not you! This, not you! Not you! Not you! Not you!
This is going off.
Yeah, that's enough of that. Jesus Christ, that's enough of that. The UK in 2025. Bunch of migrant men scrapping with men dressed as women. That's where we are. Have you had enough yet? Still want to trust your institutions that espouse the values of diversity and inclusivity and all the rest of it? Does that not make you feel a sense of despair? The birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, who took over a quarter of the world at one of the biggest empires in history, brought untold technological innovation to the world, in many ways founded the concept of human rights and all of these things, right? The Magna Carta being the premier document that basically said, the king is not to be, held above his people in the sense that he can do no wrong, right? Foreign people, groups of foreign, often men, attacking in groups that have nothing to do with us as a people, as culture, as anything, attacking men dressed as women. Stop the world. I want to get off. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, speaking of stop the world and want to get off, there was a Labour MP that actually said something kind of sensical. Kind of sensical. To the extent he's now getting called a Reform MP. So, Mike Tapp, this is where we're going to leave it for today, ladies and gentlemen. He's an MP that I've quoted a lot in the past, often to say, not exactly the most flattering things, should we say. Obviously, I'm ideologically much different to Mike in terms of worldview. He's been cheering on digital ID as far as I'm aware, saying digital ID is going to be great for this country. So again, a lot of problems with Mike. But he put this up on X. I haven't watched the clip yet, but I saw somebody respond to this, and it was very, very telling about the modern left. And I want you to think about this when you go back to this. I'll bring it up on screen for you one more time. When you go back and look at this now, ladies and gentlemen, or think about this, this is how they represented the Greens. I want you to think about one other thing, in terms of does have other left-wing views, right? Because it's a member of the Greens who made a very telling, reveal, so to speak. When Mike posted a video, he's speaking on Newsnight, Deport, deport, deport. We don't want sexual offenders and violent criminals here. That's all he said in terms of the text. I'll play you the video now. I haven't seen it yet. The responses to this have been very telling. Mehdi Hassan saying this is supposedly a Labour MP, but he sounds like a Reform MP, saying we don't want sexual offenders and violent criminals here. And then there's another guy, which I'll read his statement out in a moment, Alexander Louis Salons, member of the Green Party, eco-socialist, had some interesting remarks to say that are indicative of the modern left. Here's the video, though, for you, ladies and gentlemen. This is what Mike Tapp said that is now getting him called a Reform MP.
And I don't want these sexual offenders and violent individuals here. And that's why we'll continue to increase deporting foreign national offenders. Don't bother. We've got the biometrics. You'll be picked up and we'll be deported. Deportations removals are up over 35,000. Foreign national offender removals up 14%.
Now, obviously, the bit where he says firm fair for Britain is a complete lie. But I wish, I wish it was true. I wish it was true. Because obviously Labour are the ones in power at the moment. You want them to be doing the best for Britain. Obviously they're not. But all Mike said was, we don't want sexual offenders and violent criminals here. We will deport you. Talking about the, deportation numbers being up. You'll be picked up and you'll be deported because we have your biometrics. There's one person in the comments saying, I think you'd be better off in reform. I prefer my MPs to be more progressive than this. More progressive than deporting foreign paedophiles and violent offenders, Mike responds. If so, your view is archaic and perverse, not progressive. This is what the responses have been, ladies and gentlemen. That comment is indicative of many that I have seen. Now, some people asking, why have you let them in? Absolutely. He did indeed, however, it appears to have voted against the inquiry of the gang, right, seemingly on partisan grounds. But the funniest thing is the people on the left, that's why I think it's indicative of the modern left, ladies and gentlemen, who is saying that this guy is too right-wing. I think it's hilarious. Alexander Louis Salons, I don't know how to say his name, but he's a member of the Green Party. He's a member of Brighton and Hove Green Party, right? Oh, pardon me. And also has Greens for HS2 in his bio. This is what he said about it. This is a Reform MP. This is not a centre-left MP. Why should people feel bad when they vote out Labour when they give us MPs like this? Many on the modern left, because the Greens seem to be getting a lot of popularity at the moment with the Zach Polanski push to the fucking moon, are outright saying Labour are too hard line by saying we're going to deport sex offenders, paedophiles, and foreign criminals because they're not progressive enough. And this is also indicative of other parties as well. Plaid Cymru, very, very similar. In the sense, obviously, they want to make Wales a nation of sanctuary for the rest of the world. But one of the other Plaid Cymru representatives as well recently come out and said that prisoners should be getting the right to vote in the interest of human rights and rehabilitation. Right? And I posted the post itself, and I said, yeah, let's give pedos the right to vote. I'm laughing because of the absurdity, not because of the implication. Let's give pedos a say on the age of consent, shall we? I'm sure nothing will go wrong. When we say, ladies and gentlemen, that the left have gone absolutely fucking mad, to the point now, Mike Tapp is being called a Reform MP when he was against the inquiry. He seems to be very pro-digital ID, right? He's pro a lot of the other stuff like net zero and all of the other ludicrous bollocks, right? Not a centre-left MP. The meme where you have the cross-shaped thing, and it has right and left, and it has authoritarian versus libertarian, and the modern left, just like the majority of the modern left, is like that really top fringe left-hand corner where it's like ultra-authoritarianism and all across the left, and anything outside of that is far right. This simping for foreign paedophiles, ladies and gentlemen. The Greens, in this instance, Alexander Louis Salon, and he still hasn't taken this down, by the way. He posted this 2 days ago. He still hasn't taken it down. They see an MP, I don't like coming to the defence of Labour MPs, but in this instance, it does warrant it for the fringe, notion. I'm not even coming to the defense of Mike because I like his policy on this, and I support him himself. I'm literally having to say that, hang on, Mike is getting shit for saying he wants to deport foreign sex offenders and foreign criminals, violent criminals. And the left is giving him shit for it. Look at where the modern left is going. If you're on that side of the left, ladies and gentlemen, maybe just have a look in mirror, and you can have a look in the mirror by checking out one of the videos that is exactly about that topic, where I decided the last girl, go over to the member section and support the show and everything like that. Or you can get the clip itself on the YouTubes and on the Rumbles, etc. But yeah, that's interesting, ladies and gentlemen. Many on the left, you notice you didn't see that in the school thing, which I'll show you again now. You know, the school thing where you know, the Greens, where it says some left-wing policy. You know, they have some left-wing policies, ladies and gentlemen. But, you know, it doesn't say anything on there about, oh, yeah, they have councillors that support not deporting foreign paedophiles. Notice how it doesn't say that on the left wing of your school graphic. But it does indeed say that for UKIP and Reform, that they have supporters that have extremist views. How interesting is that? And that'll do it for today. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful more than anything. Another one of those long episodes, but I realized there was so much that I had to cover, I wanted to cover. Yeah, a lot of them quite difficult to talk about. But yeah, stay tuned for a really good interview coming up with Joe Marsh. I think it'd be really interesting. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I do apologize in advance. There's a couple of technical hiccups in there which have resulted in slight syncing issues, but it doesn't appear to have derailed it too much. But yeah, stay tuned. It's going to be a great conversation. It'll be up for members first. If you want to get on over to any of the members sections to get your early access to that, then please do. You'll have more exclusive content coming up very, very soon as well. Please do stay tuned. But yeah, you take care, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for watching and or listening. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, night, wherever you are. Diolch yn fawr. Thank you for watching. Hwyl fawr. We'll see you next time. And you take very good care of yourselves now. Godspeed.